Friend.
All right, move on through.
Thanks.
This is revolution. In the fictional world of The Last of Us, the initial outbreak of the cordyceps brain infection decimated rural areas before the federal government made any informative call to action. The WHO says that vaccination tests are failing. The bureaucrats, low-level policy-making politicians, lose power. The fragments of the scattered U.S. government become an organization called the Federal Disaster Response Agency. The U.S. President and FEDRA enact martial law, and a majority of the American population are held in FEDRA-run quarantine zones. Their form of currency are cards, which are used to buy food and access to the outside. Sometime into quarantine, rations reach an all-time low and riots break out in the winter. We can assume that rations never really got better until 2 direct attacks on a quarantine zone takes place. As far as we know, there were no casualties. A group calling themselves the Fireflies takes responsibility for it. The intro says that their public charter calls for the return of all branches of government. Fireflies are saying that the state of anarchy that civilization is in isn't doing anyone any good and they need to rebuild. So FEDRA, being the level-headed and reasonable organization that it is, starts publicly executing Fireflies. This all takes place in the 20 years since Outbreak Day, when a US soldier killed Joel's daughter. And not just like, oops, a bullet hit the girl. No, like he was ordered to and he aimed. The game has a clear antagonistic organization. I mean, the World Health Organization, a non-federal agency, couldn't make a vaccine, so the federal government just gave up. You don't have to make the vaccine turn zombies back to normal. That's impossible. Just make it so that healthy people can't get infected from bites or spores. We did it with measles and rabies and polio. We can do it with fungi. FEDRA has the infrastructure, the hospitals, the manpower, the scientists, the tools, the training, the best chance at impactful distribution. So why didn't they do anything about the outbreak? Why did they allow populations to suffer more than necessary? In what world do our leaders prioritize keeping a status quo instead of restabilizing the planet? Oh wait, yeah, I guess that's realistic. Video games are just an entertainment medium at the end of the day, but when it's done really well, it's also an impactful storytelling medium. And stories are how we can assimilate complex information in a way that feels less like getting hit in the face with a 50-pound book. The story that The Last of Us is hiding under a zombie apocalypse survival story is one that is critiquing establishment. The corrupt FEDRA agents and the degeneration of the Seraphites in the second game are key points in realizing that. But how it visualizes the people who are fighting back is so abysmal that it turned half the fandom against its revolutionaries. And that's kind of the point, because we need to rationalize Joel's decision at the end of the first game in some form. But it's also kind of missing the point because Ellie believed in the Fireflies and didn't agree with Joel's decision at the end of the game. In her birthday flashback with Joel in the second game, the scene ends on a beat that outlines that she is still torn after all these years. She doesn't fully believe that the Fireflies were liars, and she was right. Joel was. When you focus on the violence while ignoring the root causes, thus portraying protesters as traitors, or that other word that starts with a T that I can't say this early in a YouTube video, you end up vilifying revolution, the exact same way that mainstream media does when someone finally starts to fight back. Ever since the first game came out, I knew that Marlene had a point. Whether she and her team could make a vaccine was irrelevant to me, although we'll get into that later. The fact is, someone needed to try. I know what all the pessimists are going to say. The world was doomed anyways. Humanity is a parasite on Mother Earth's back. Even if the vaccine worked, they would never be able to distribute it. But the fact of the matter is that people like Marlene don't think like that. People like her, leaders and organizers, think this isn't right, we have to do something about this, and then they do something about it. Whatever they can think of. That way of thinking is exactly why we have modern science. It's why we have air conditioning. It's why we have insulin. It's why we have the right to vote. And many times, before someone could do it, people believed that it couldn't possibly be done. A vaccine against rabies was unheard of until 1885, and a vaccine against polio was unheard of until the 1950s. People thought it was impossible. And what scientific research does or doesn't get funded is political. Marlene deliberately doesn't tell Joel that the plan is to smuggle Ellie to a surgeon because Joel isn't a good person, but he's above child trafficking. It's lying by omission. Joel wouldn't have agreed, and he wouldn't have even entertained the idea if Tess weren't there to get back their weapons. And it's not until the last act that Marlene admits that the operation they have planned for Ellie would 100% lead to her death. Once again, lying by omission about literal human trafficking for organ harvest. That's not great. But it's important to note that the goal here is a vaccine. The intention of this sacrifice is for the betterment of their society. She's like Ava Stratt from Project Hail Mary. Great movie, you should watch it. One death for humanity's survival and being hailed as the villain if it fails is a coin toss that she is willing to make. But Marlene's fatal mistake was that she didn't consider that Joel is a selfish person with child loss trauma. And I'm not here to argue about whether or not Joel's decision was right or not in the end. I think right and wrong for a decision that extreme imposes a binary that doesn't capture the full decision and stakes. I don't even think that moral or immoral does this man's decision justice. But let's be clear. The vaccine would have worked. And I know a ton of you just shot up out of your seats and went no because something science, and you're not wrong. The science is off. But that wasn't an intentional writing measure to make Marlene, Jerry, or the Fireflies seem incompetent or ignorant. It was a result of genuine writing error from the writer's room.
Remember, our conversation was, could the Fireflies make a cure? And our intent was, yes, they could.
Right.
Now, is our science a little shaky that now people are questioning it? Yeah, it was a little shaky and now people are questioning that. I can't say anything. All I can say is our intent is that they would have made a cure. That makes the most interesting philosophical question for what Joel does.
I don't agree with everything this man says and does, but this confirmation is exactly what the fandom needs to have a more effective conversation about morality and ethics. It's like the trolley problem, except you know for sure the one guy tied to the tracks will find the cure for cancer if he lives. Now the stakes are much higher. Now Joel becomes a little more complex. But okay, that's just one thing. Marlene and Jerry would have made the vaccine. The father of the franchise says so. It is law. But one of my biggest issues with the second game is that they refuse to develop Ellie's ideas about FEDRA and the Fireflies. When Ellie's flashback between her and Joel on her birthday ended on a note about society's hatred for the Fireflies, I expected there to be another layer to peel back, a layer that Riley and Marlene had implemented in her. But there wasn't. Instead, the game says Firefly explode thing, Firefly bad. This is something I really hope is resolved in the third game, and if they don't even touch on that, you will hear from me. Joel's decision to save Ellie was also the decision to kill Marlene, and consequently, side with FEDRA over the Fireflies. But the game doesn't have time to tell us about that because it wants to tell us about Joel. Luckily, I have all the time in the world. Both the W.L.F and the Fireflies recognize FEDRA as a fascist agency, and the term fascist is very important here. A fascist is a follower of a political philosophy that is characterized by authoritarian views, a strong central government, and no tolerance for opposing opinions. Fascists also tend to draw upon corporatist ideas, ideologies implemented by corporations which center the economy over human autonomy as instruments for social control. Ideally, a corporatist democracy would use the powers and infrastructure of the economy to the benefit of the general population and state. But fascists specifically use it to control the actions of its citizens, like using cards as a new form of currency that act as barriers for leaving camp or getting food. But it's worth noting that the fandom in large agrees that the FEDRA quarantine zones function more like feudalistic societies under the control of warlords. Each QZ functions autonomously. This theory defies the one fascist clause of ultranationalism, but it's just a theory, and not one that stands too good on its own. Some documents from the game reference a central command somewhere, and the show hints that quarantine zones are working together to move and supply weaponry. So the idea of nationalism, where a group asserts superiority and promotes its interests above all other nations, isn't off the table. And let's revisit our last point. Science is political in the sense that whatever receives federal funding is usually what ends up seeing successful results in the long run. From an article titled Breakthroughs and Challenges in Fungal Vaccine Development written by Samantha Avina, she writes, "One of the biggest potential barriers to the development of an antifungal medicine and interest from the biotechnology industry is the high cost of research for a product that will target a small percentage of the population." The fact that FEDRA has all the federal funding While the Fireflies, a ragtag group of protesters with guns, is the one pursuing the creation of the vaccine while FEDRA isn't, says a lot about both of the facilities. So here's the rundown of how I think the game fails at the FEDRA versus Fireflies debate, and in turn, how the media vilifies revolution. Number 1, the game lore makes it easy to blame one faction over the other. The Fireflies' inner mechanisms is common knowledge while FEDRA's isn't. We know that Marlene is the queen of the Fireflies, but we don't know who the head of FEDRA is. We can point fingers at one faction but not at the other. It makes the antagonists sink into the shadows while the people fighting back take stage in front of a crowd with baskets of tomatoes ready. Number 2, people clown on anyone who tries, especially when they fail. We are a judgmental society at our core, and when someone has a big aspiration, we try to dumb them down. The fandom successfully vilifies the revolutionaries for dreaming too big, and the hope dies with them. What makes this scenario particularly sad is because the Fireflies' ambition was to save humanity from the hole it was digging. There's no laughs to be had except for the people who want to claim Joel's moral superiority and don't care about the ramifications of a century-long pandemic. Number 3. The media has trouble framing this as activism. It's hard in most media to portray violence as activism. There's a good reason for that. Don't get me wrong, non-violent direct action was critical in getting us where we are today, but direct action is what really disrupted the status quo. The Black Panthers armed themselves. The activism that the Fireflies are advocating for is healthcare activism. Much like the fight for women's healthcare, transgender healthcare, and fighting against racism in healthcare practices, the goal is to make sure that no one gets sick if it's preventable, mentally or physically. But let me make a comparison to civil rights activism real quick. In 1962, Martin Luther King and several other civil rights organizers organized a protest in the city of Birmingham, Alabama. In 1963, Sheriff Bull Connor decided to deal with the protests using fire hoses and police dogs. Before then, the Black population of America was being terrorized daily for decades and made to feel unsafe no matter where they were in the country. In the early 1960s, Robert F. Williams, a civil rights leader, advocated for armed self-defense in North Carolina and demonstrated that armed Black citizens could deter racist violence and provide a degree of security in the absence of adequate protection from the authorities. In May 1967, a group of about 30 armed Panthers led by Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, and Eldridge Cleaver marched into the Capitol building to protest the Mulford Act bill, a bill that would make it illegal to carry loaded firearms in public. Yes, the first ever documented piece of gun control legislation in the United States was made as a reaction to Black people having guns. Whoop-de-doo. While the Panthers were ultimately arrested for unlawful assembly, it brought the issue of police brutality and the right to bear arms to the forefront of national conversation. These armed Panthers protected the Black Panther Party's national free breakfast programs, health clinics, shoe donation drives, and operated as a force to police the police, and that scared the living daylights out of them. In response to the BPP's success, the FBI, under the direction of Hoover, created the COINTELPRO program. The FBI's counterintelligence program, among other heinous actions, used the media to discredit the Black Panther Party by systematically planting false stories, circulating fabricated documents, and exploiting existing tensions to paint the party as violent criminals rather than a community organization. By feeding disinformation to compliant journalists and releasing anonymous letters, the FBI successfully manipulated public opinion and turned the press against the BPP. And unfortunately, art imitates life. This discrediting campaign of the Black Panther Party, among other socialist groups, led to the development of revolutionary parties in film, books, and video games being treated through the same vilifying lens. The FBI manipulating the media to make the public think something, and the fandom discussing something in a fictional piece of work is actually kind of similar. Except now, instead of the people at the top of the power structure controlling how people think of and view the revolutionaries, the fandom regurgitates that same point of view. When the fandom makes comments about how Joel was 100% right and the Fireflies were 100% wrong, or how the Fireflies were stupid for thinking they could make a cure, the fandom creates this image of the Fireflies that is very similar to how the FBI created the image of the Black Panther Party. When you look at it as a fictional piece of media, sure, it's all haha funny, but then you go into real life with those ideas stuck in your head. How we think about fictional media also affects how we view the real world. And just to be clear, COINTELPRO is still happening to this day, all because the Black Panthers realized that a system that only responds in violence only understands violence. The Fireflies realized that too. Although I understand the hatred towards Marlene for not giving Ellie the chance to consent or not to the surgery, Joel didn't either. Joel made that decision for her just like Marlene was going to. And even if not giving a little bit more grace to the Fireflies, I also noticed that people never want to blame FEDRA for what's happening. When you point your finger at the revolutionaries but don't want to address the systems that force these revolutions to take place, you are allowing those systems to continue. So when people say that the Fireflies were wrong or they couldn't have done this or that, and they don't mention FEDRA at all, I know that they're not having the right conversation. I mean, go ahead and hate the Fireflies, but why don't you hate FEDRA more? That surgery was our last and only chance, and most of the fandom thinks for the sake of Joel's happiness, it was all worth it. I was with Marlene from day one, but it wouldn't have hurt to have asked Ellie what she wanted to do. I feel like I know what her answer would have been.
I'm not trying to.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
Media literacy is a fun skill to have, and it requires historical knowledge and at least the awareness of social institutions and what conventional society expects. It's a way for you to distinguish propaganda in media and notice why stories are written the way they are and what they are trying to make you think. It's doubly important to know what you think and value and to not let the media you consume sway you. Media is a useful storytelling tool at its best and a controlling form of propaganda at its worst. All of this to say, the Fireflies weren't perfect, but they were right.